News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moskow.
Karen, we begin with new developments on tariffs. President Donald Trump says he is likely to impose levies on pharmaceuticals as soon as the end of the month. He didn't specify a rate, but any tariff would likely impact the likes of Eli Lilly, Merck, and Pfizer, which all produce drugs overseas. The president spoke with reporters.
Pharmaceuticals will be tariffed probably at the end of the month, and we're going to start off with a low tariff and give the pharmaceutical companies a year or so to build, and then we're going to make it a very high tariff.
In comments heard live on Bloomberg Radio, President Trump also said his timeline for implementing semiconductor tariffs is similar.
Nathan, the president also predicted that he could strike 2 or 3 trade deals with countries before implementing his so-called reciprocal tariffs on August 1st. He also says he's reached a deal with Indonesia.
Indonesia is very strong on copper, but we have full access to everything. We will pay no tariffs. So they are giving us access into Indonesia, which we never had. That's probably the biggest part of the deal. And the other part is they are going to pay 19%. And we are going to pay nothing.
On social media, the president also said Indonesia has committed to purchase $15 billion in U.S. energy, $4.5 billion worth of agricultural products, and 50 Boeing jets.
And Karen, the president is continuing his criticism of Jay Powell. That's as Bloomberg News has learned. Kevin Hassett, director of the White House National Economic Council, is the early frontrunner to replace Powell as Fed chair next year. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the formal process to find a Powell successor has already begun. In an interview heard right here on Bloomberg Radio, Bessent suggested Powell should also not remain on the Fed's Board of Governors after his term as chair ends.
There's been a lot of talk of a shadow Fed chair causing confusion in advance of his or her nomination. And I can tell you, I think it'd be very confusing for the market for a former Fed chair to stay on also.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he is part of the decision-making process, but the final decision will come from President Trump.
Well, Nathan, Congress is a step closer to clawing back billions of dollars in funds for public broadcasting and foreign aid. The Senate has voted to advance $9.4 billion in cuts on a 51-50 vote, with Vice President J.D. Vance breaking the tie. The measure would cancel funds for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds PBS and NPR. The networks have warned that could force local stations to close. But House Speaker Mike Johnson says public media have misused federal funds.
They're biased reporting. They're not objective. They pretend to be so. They have for a long time. And the people don't need to fund that.
And House Speaker Mike Johnson spoke before the White House offered assurances to South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds that tribal radio stations would receive $10 million. The package now heads to a vote-a-rama of amendment votes before the Senate takes final action today.
Karen, a controversy that has split President Trump's voter base is now threatening a wider Republican divide. It's over the administration's handling of documents related to disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. This month, the Justice Department said it had no new information to release, even after Attorney General Pam Bondi told Fox News earlier this year that she had Epstein's client list waiting on her desk. Now, Republicans like Missouri Senator Josh Hawley are calling for more transparency.
I think all this stuff ought to be public. I mean, I think all the documents should all be public. I think it all ought to be out in the open.
Another Republican, Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie, says he'll force a vote in the House to release documents. President Trump says Republicans should put Epstein behind them.
I don't understand it, why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life.
President Trump says he thinks Attorney General Bondi's handled the case well. He's suggested without evidence that the Epstein files were made up by Democrats.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moskow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.